What if one night changed everything for Elvis Presley? A night when jealousy turned into a dangerous obsession that no one could have predicted. Imagine a sold-out concert where the king of rock and roll was in his element, captivating the crowd, when suddenly, chaos erupted. An unexpected, dramatic onstage incident shook Elvis to his core, leading him down a dark path of suspicion and paranoia. But what, or who, triggered this intense reaction? The answer is more shocking than you might think, involving someone close to his heart. Stay tuned as we reveal the gripping story of how admiration turned into a relentless obsession over one man. You won't believe the twist that sent Elvis spiraling. Stay tuned as we unravel the unbelievable story behind this wild moment in Elvis Presley's history. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more incredible stories about the king of rock and roll. Number 5. Background and setup. Elvis Presley, even at the peak of his fame, was haunted by a deep, lingering fear, one that followed him onto the stage every night. With his legendary performances drawing thousands, the thought of a potential threat always lurked in the back of his mind. He feared that one day, an attacker might try to strike during one of his shows, and this anxiety became a constant shadow over his otherwise electrifying presence. Despite the roaring applause and adoration of his fans, a sense of unease crept in, making him increasingly watchful and alert. He never knew if a smile in the audience masked darker intentions, and that fear, that nagging thought that danger could strike at any moment, slowly consumed him. Amidst this growing tension, a new figure entered the lives of Elvis and Priscilla, Mike Stone, a skilled karate instructor with a strong presence. It was Elvis himself who introduced Stone to Priscilla, seeing in him a disciplined and talented fighter. Elvis had even encouraged her to train with Stone, impressed by his martial arts skills and respect for the art. At first, this connection seemed innocent, a way for Priscilla to gain confidence and for Elvis to admire Stone's expertise. Stone's reputation as a fierce competitor in the karate world made him someone Elvis respected, a man who earned his admiration with every demonstration of his skills. But the dynamic between them would soon change, shifting from admiration to something far more complicated. As time went on, what began as simple training sessions evolved into something deeper between Priscilla and Stone, and Elvis's feelings took a darker turn. It wasn't long before their professional relationship transformed into a romantic one, and this development struck a nerve with Elvis. The respect he once held for Stone turned into a burning resentment. Suddenly, Stone was no longer the admirable fighter. He was a rival, a man who had crossed a line by becoming close to the woman Elvis once loved. This new reality was hard for Elvis to accept, and it brought out emotions he could barely control. The admiration he once felt turned sour, replaced by jealousy and anger, a dangerous mix that would soon take over his thoughts. But what happened next took this jealousy to a level no one could have expected, leading to a shocking confrontation that would leave everyone stunned. You won't believe the twist that followed. Number 4. The incident that changed everything. The night was supposed to be just like any other, with Elvis Presley captivating the crowd in one of his legendary 1973 concerts. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. As Elvis belted out one of his hits, 4 men suddenly rushed the stage, pushing through security and heading straight for him. The crowd erupted in panic, their cheers turning to gasps and shouts as chaos took over the once electrifying atmosphere. Fans looked on in shock as security scrambled to contain the situation, desperately trying to keep the stage secure. What had been a night of music and celebration quickly turned into a scene of confusion and danger, one that no one present would ever forget. Amid the turmoil, Elvis himself leapt into action, proving that the king of rock and roll wasn't about to back down easily. As his bodyguards wrestled with the intruders, Elvis confronted one of the attackers head-on, shoving him back into the crowd with surprising strength. Determination and adrenaline coursed through him as he fought to regain control of the stage. The audience could hardly believe their eyes. Elvis wasn't just a performer anymore. He was fighting for his own safety right before them. Eventually, with the help of his entourage, the men were subdued and dragged away, leaving the stage littered with the aftermath of the struggle. But even as the music resumed, and Elvis attempted to carry on with the show, something in his eyes had changed. There was a new, unmistakable tension that lingered long after the final note played. After the dust settled, Elvis couldn't shake the unsettling feeling left by the incident. The fear and adrenaline began to give way to suspicion, and his thoughts turned to the one person who now haunted him: Mike Stone. It wasn't long before Elvis began to believe that the attack wasn't random at all. He became convinced that Stone, Priscilla's new boyfriend, might have been behind the chaos, sending those men to disrupt the show. As the paranoia deepened, he saw Stone's shadow behind every threat, every unexpected twist. To Elvis, it all started to make sense. Stone had the motive, the opportunity, and perhaps even the desire to hurt him in such a public way. But could it really be true, or was this just Elvis's mind playing tricks on him? The possibility alone was enough to consume his thoughts, driving him to the brink of desperation. And what he decided to do next would shock everyone around him, pushing the boundaries between fear and obsession even further. Stay tuned, because the real story is just getting started. Number 3. The growing obsession. As the days passed, Elvis's initial suspicions of Mike Stone began to fester, transforming into a full-blown obsession. What started as a passing thought, a nagging feeling that maybe Stone had a hand in the chaos that night, soon took root in Elvis's mind. He couldn't let go of the idea that Stone was plotting against him, that Priscilla's new boyfriend might be out to do more than steal her heart. Perhaps he wanted to take down the king himself. Elvis began talking about Stone incessantly, bringing up his name in conversations with friends, bodyguards, and anyone who would listen. He would pore over every detail of Stone's life, analyzing his movements, his words, his intentions. In Elvis's mind, Stone wasn't just a romantic rival. He was a threat that had to be understood, watched, and ultimately stopped. Elvis's thoughts quickly took a darker turn, revealing a side of him that even those closest to him had rarely seen. He began to speak of Stone with a chilling determination, convinced that drastic measures were the only way to end the perceived threat. According to Peter Goralnik's biography, Careless Love, the unmaking of Elvis Presley, Elvis ranted to his trusted bodyguard Sonny, declaring, "There is too much pain in me and he did it. Do you hear me? I am right. Mike Stone must die. You will do it for me. Kill the son of Abnan, Sonny. I can count on you." These words, spoken in the heat of paranoia and anger, exposed just how far Elvis was willing to go. His thoughts lingered on revenge, on the idea that Stone's very existence was a challenge to his own. It was no longer about winning Priscilla back or proving himself. It had become something much more sinister. The shift in Elvis's feelings towards Stone was stark and jarring. Not long before, he had held Stone in high regard, admiring his strength and discipline as a karate instructor. He had even praised Stone to Priscilla, calling him a real badass and someone who was truly impressive in the martial arts. But now, all that admiration had turned into venomous resentment. Stone, the man Elvis once respected, was now the object of his hatred, the source of all his fears and frustrations. The contrast between Elvis's earlier respect and his newfound rage was startling to those who witnessed it, as if the man they knew had been replaced by someone consumed by jealousy and bitterness. And as his thoughts grew darker, the people around him couldn't help but wonder. How far would Elvis go to silence the man he had come to see as his greatest enemy? Number 2. Shocking details emerge. The tension boiling inside Elvis eventually spilled out in terrifying outbursts, leaving those around him deeply unsettled. In private, he raged to his bodyguard, Sonny West, fixating on the idea that Mike Stone needed to be eliminated. In one particularly chilling moment, Elvis's voice cracked with a desperate fury as he implored Sonny to do the unthinkable. "Mike Stone must die," he said, his tone a mix of pleading and command. "You will do it for me, Sonny. I can count on you." His words were a startling break from reality, revealing a man who was willing to cross lines he had never even approached before. It was a terrifying glimpse into just how deeply this obsession had taken hold of him, pushing him to a place where reason and logic seemed to no longer matter. This consuming fixation with Mike Stone came at a heavy price for Elvis, affecting him in ways that reached beyond the confines of his private conversations. Emotionally, he was fraying at the edges, as the constant suspicion and anger eroded his ability to focus on anything else. Those who were once close to him found it harder to connect with the man they had known for years. The charm and humor that defined him had been replaced with paranoia and bitterness. His once steady relationships began to crack under the pressure of his obsession, leaving him increasingly isolated. It was as if the shadow of Mike Stone loomed over every aspect of his life, casting a darkness that clouded even his passion for music and performing. This shift in his demeanor was impossible to ignore, and the emotional toll was evident to anyone who spent time with him. Even his loyal fans who had idolized him for years started to notice a change in Elvis's behavior both on and off stage. There was a restlessness to his performances, a tension that hadn't been there before. On stage, he moved with a sense of urgency, as if he were constantly looking over his shoulder. Off stage, he seemed distracted, as if his mind was always elsewhere, caught in the web of his own fears and suspicions. Fans whispered about how he seemed different, less like the confident, carefree Elvis they had adored, and more like a man carrying an invisible burden. The laughter that once came so easily was now strained, replaced by a haunted look that hinted at the turmoil within. And while many hoped that the king would soon return to his old self, others couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed for good. The world was watching, but few could have imagined just how dark this story would become. Number 1. Fallout and reflection. The aftermath of Elvis's growing fixation was felt by everyone in his circle, but none more than Priscilla Presley and Mike Stone. As Elvis's rants and dark thoughts persisted, they inevitably reached Priscilla's ears, straining her relationship with Stone. She found herself caught between her past with Elvis and her new life, feeling the weight of his anger even from a distance. What had once been a romantic escape with Stone turned into something much more complicated, as the shadow of Elvis loomed over their every interaction. Priscilla struggled to reconcile the man she had once loved with the one now consumed by resentment and jealousy. Meanwhile, Stone himself faced the brunt of the tension, constantly aware that he was the subject of Elvis's intense fixation. The budding relationship that had once offered comfort for both Priscilla and Stone now carried the heavy burden of Elvis's looming presence, making it impossible for them to truly escape his shadow. This unsettling chapter in Elvis's life revealed much more than just his jealousy. It exposed the intense pressures and inner battles he faced in his later years. Behind the glamorous persona of the king of rock and roll was a man struggling with feelings of loss, insecurity, and a fear that he could no longer control the narrative of his own life. The world saw him as an untouchable icon, but in reality, Elvis was haunted by the knowledge that he was no longer the center of Priscilla's world, that life had moved on without him. His public and private worlds clashed, leaving him feeling increasingly isolated and desperate. This episode with Stone became a painful reminder of the things slipping through his fingers: his relationship with Priscilla, his sense of control, and perhaps even his sense of self. It's as if the obsession with Stone was a symptom of something deeper within Elvis, an attempt to reclaim some semblance of power in a world that felt like it was slipping away. But the question remains, was this incident with Mike Stone the breaking point for Elvis, or merely a symptom of a much deeper struggle? Was this a moment that tipped him over the edge, revealing a side of Elvis that few had ever seen? Or was it just one of many cracks in the facade of a man who had been struggling for years? As we look back at this dramatic time in Elvis's life, it's hard not to wonder if the pressures of fame, the weight of his past, and the changing dynamics of his personal life all collided in a way that Elvis simply couldn't withstand. It leaves us questioning whether this was the turning point that set him on a darker path, or if it was part of a larger unraveling that had been in motion long before that fateful night. What do you think? Was this a final cry for control, or had the king's struggles been simmering beneath the surface for far longer? As you reflect on this intense chapter in Elvis's life, we want to hear from you. Do you think this fixation marked the turning point in Elvis's downfall, or was it just one piece of a much larger puzzle of struggles he faced in his final years? Was this obsession a sign of his vulnerability, or something darker that had been building over time? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. We're eager to see what you think about this hidden side of the king's story.